I'm Brandi Kruse, and this is Politics Unpacked. Politics Unpacked is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42, making Washington a place for all to prosper. Sign up for their newsletter at future42.org. Welcome to Politics Unpacked on this 8th week of the legislative session. Let's recap what happened this week and start with some controversial bills that are still alive, but their fate is uncertain, including pay for striking workers. This is a policy that Democrats pushed last session, but didn't make it across the finish line. They're hoping it's different this time around. Senate Bill 5041 would allow workers who are on strike to collect unemployment benefits from the state's unemployment insurance fund. It has already passed out of the Senate Committee on Labor and Commerce. It was then referred to Ways and Means. It passed out of the Ways and Means Committee, and now it's waiting for a vote on the Senate floor. It would then, of course, have to go over to the House and be signed into law by the governor, but it's still unclear whether it has the support not only on the Senate side, but in the House. Opponents of the bill say it would be an improper use of the state's unemployment insurance program, which provides unemployment benefits to individuals who lose their job through no fault of their own. Another controversial bill that hasn't quite stalled out, but it's not clear if it has the support to move forward, is House Bill 1380. We've talked about it on the show before, and it would essentially make homeless individuals a protected class, making it easier for them to sue cities or counties that remove them from homeless encampments. The bill is backed by Democrats and has already passed out of the House Housing Committee and Appropriations. It's now waiting for a vote on the House floor. The bill says it would encourage the efficient use of state and local resources by providing clear guidance to local governments on how to balance public safety with the urgent need to transition people experiencing homelessness to safe and stable housing. It says it would encourage local governments to enact objectively reasonable time, place, and manner regulations to manage public spaces effectively and preserve public peace, health, and safety for the benefit of the entire community. But opponents, including an awful lot of local mayors, say this bill would hinder their ability to cut down on public camping. There is now bipartisan pressure in Olympia to get Senate Bill 5071 across the finish line after a similar bill died in the House. Senate Bill 5071 would expand the scope of Washington's child endangerment laws. Right now, under current law, a person can commit the crime of endangerment with a controlled substance if they knowingly allow a child to be exposed to meth or the ingredients used to make meth. The problem is the current law doesn't include fentanyl, so exposing a child to fentanyl doesn't carry the same weight as exposing a child to methamphetamine under law as it exists today. Senate Bill 5071 has both Republican and Democratic sponsors who say the legislation needs to pass this year after failing to advance last year, given the number of children across our state who have been exposed to fentanyl in their homes, some of them fatally. But the bill would have to make it out of the House Public Safety Committee, where the chairman, Roger Goodman, has already refused to give hearings to a similar bill. Governor Bob Ferguson this week announced his plans to fix Washington state's beleaguered ferry system. The ferry system has had all sorts of problems, from low staffing to canceled runs or delayed runs.
Since the pandemic, we have been operating on what we call a reduced schedule. And this reduction has, of course, had significant impacts for Washingtonians who rely on the ferries for their daily activities, for getting to important appointments, for going to school, for getting to work. Today, I'm announcing short-term and long-term plans to fully restore the state's domestic ferry service to pre-pandemic levels by this summer. Part of the reason why we've had a reduced schedule since before the pandemic is because we've not had all of our boats in the water. One vessel, for example, the Wenatchee, one of our larger vessels, has been out of service in order to convert to be a hybrid electric engine. We have 2 more vessels slated for conversion over the next several years, which would also take them out of the water during that time. Today, I'm announcing that we are delaying the hybrid electric conversion for those remaining 2 state ferries.
Ferguson says he hopes some of these changes will help in the short term while they come up with a long-term strategy. He also says they want to make sure to improve ferry service in time for the FIFA World Cup in Seattle in 2026. Meanwhile, a controversial bill now being discussed in Olympia that we haven't talked about on the show before is Senate Bill 5266, and it would allow juvenile offenders to petition for early release starting at the age of 24. The bill says any person convicted of 1 or more crimes committed prior to the person's 18th birthday may petition for early release if the person reaches the age of 24 or older, unless the person has been convicted of 3 or more murder offenses, in which case the person may petition after serving no less than 20 years. The criticism of this bill is kind of obvious, given that a minor could commit not 1 murder but 2 murders and still be considered for early release at the age of 24. Meanwhile, the biggest issue of the 2025 legislative session seems to still be up in the air, with lawmakers and the governor's office seemingly no closer to knowing how they're going to close the state's roughly $14 billion budget deficit. As we discussed on Politics Unpacked last week, Governor Bob Ferguson came out with about $7 billion in proposed cuts, but he declined to answer questions about whether he would support any new tax revenues.
After going through this exercise anyway, are you now leaning more in the direction that you might have to sign off on some tax increases, and what would they look like?
I'd say it's too soon to say right now, Jim.
Aren't tax, regardless of what type of tax is, just the basic math indicate that some sort of taxes are inevitable?
Look, I'm new to being governor, but I'm not new to the legislature, right? Last time I checked, we've still got 2 months to go in this legislative session. I need to sit down and have a conversation with legislative leaders. What are they finding out? I know they're doing their own work, which is not insignificant. They're leaning into it as well. So look, at some point, I'll have a better answer to that question, but I just don't think that's right now.
Meanwhile, Democrats in the legislature have been talking more about increased taxes than they have cuts to the budget. And so it's really up to Democratic leadership in the House and Senate, where they have control, and the governor's office to get together and figure out how they're going to reach that $14 billion figure. That has been Politics Unpacked for this 8th week of the legislative session. I'm Brandi Kruse. Have a great weekend. Politics Unpacked is brought to you by Future 42, making Washington a place for all to prosper. Sign up for their newsletter at future42.org. And in the meantime, join us 4 days a week for our live show, Undivided, where we give context and have important conversations about what's happening in Washington state and beyond. Undividedpod.com. That's undividedpod.com.